Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today, I'm joined by Paul Raffile, a world-renowned intelligence analyst focused on cyber threats and transnational organized crime. Hi, Paul. Thank you for being here.
Delighted to be here.
So first, tell me a little bit about your experience in the space and what brought you to work in this kind of crazy world.
Yeah, for sure. So for the past 10 years, I've been an intel analyst. My first job right out of college was tracking ISIS on social media platforms.
Wow.
And from there, I moved over to the corporate sector and was monitoring threats against executives, companies, products, and their employees. So more recently, I've been focused on cybercrime and its impact targeting Americans. In particular, I've been focused on a crime called financial sextortion, which is targeting youth at such a rapid scale over these past 24 months.
Thank you. So that's exactly what we're going to dig into today. And listeners here are parents, so I just want to educate parents on this heavy, horrible topic, but something that unfortunately parents need to be aware of and figure out how to protect our children from this and inform our children on this. So we're going to talk about like where it's happening, who's doing it, how it's happening, all that kind of stuff today. Whatever you can share is helpful for parents. So if you can just describe first, what is financial sextortion for people who haven't heard of that?
Yeah, so let's actually go back a step and define sextortion. Okay. Sextortion is the act of blackmailing someone for some sexually explicit, material or threatening to reveal something if they don't comply. That's not necessarily a new crime. That's, of course, been going on since the start of the internet and texting. What is new is this financial component, turning that crime into a scam and then executing it at scale. Just to put some numbers to this, back in 2021, there were only 139 reported cases of financial sextortion targeting minors here in the US. Just 2 years later, in 2023, that number was 26,000. So we jumped from 139 to 26,000 during that 2-year time frame. During this period, there's been 32 suicides of victims while they were being blackmailed. Almost all of them are young boys, 13 to 17, being targeted by this crime.
Yeah, so that is all reported numbers. How do you feel? Like, what's your feeling around how many people are actually reporting it? Because this is a situation that can be very embarrassing for both the child and the parents sometimes don't want people to expose it. So do you have any just theory around what actual numbers could look like?
Yeah, for sure. You're right. And these scammers rely on the embarrassment and the shame associated with this type of scam. That's why it's so effective at coercing their victims. Yeah. The Australian Federal Police actually estimate that less than 10% of cases of financial sextortion are reported. So if we're looking at 26,000 reported cases last year, that's probably more like 250,000 actual cases just here in the US alone.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot. Are there any trends in who's getting targeted? Are any locations that are specifically getting targeted? Anything that parents should know regarding who's getting targeted?
The simple answer is high school boys in Western countries, Canada, the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, as well as across Europe.
Uh-huh. And then how is this going down? So when they're getting targeted, can you walk parent listeners through how this happens?
So cyber criminals are using a vast network of fake Instagram accounts, catfishing teens into thinking that they're young females. Mm-hmm. So these accounts, they have fake profile photos, fake everything on them. And they're essentially adding as many teen boys as they can on Instagram. We're looking at these accounts. They're adding hundreds of potential victims or targets every day. We're reporting these accounts that we know are committing sextortion, and oftentimes they aren't even getting taken down. From there, this is obviously a numbers game. Not every kid is going to respond to that friend request or that follow request or even the initial messages. So these scammers essentially just go down entire friends lists and contact lists of folks and just add everybody that they can that fits into their target.
Mm-hmm. Is there no regulation on how many Instagram accounts you can sign up for or any verification that you are a human being?
There are minimal procedures in place for an Instagram account, okay. But these criminals are hacking or buying aged Instagram accounts in order to look more authentic. So a lot of these accounts that are actually engaging with victims, it shows that the account has existed on Instagram since 2018, 2016. That signals potentially authenticity behind the account, which of course makes it a little bit more tricky to detect that that's actually a scammer behind that account.
Right. And John DeMay had mentioned that in his case with Jordan, the account that had contacted him was a Danny Roberts, a young girl's account, and it had actually been hacked. So that was a human girl that lived somewhere that's account had been hacked by the scammer. And then you mentioned that you report these scam accounts or these fake accounts and they're rarely getting taken down? Is there any stats around that, or just like most are not getting removed?
In my experience, most of my reports have not resulted in action from Meta. There are certainly exceptions to that. There are cases where we're reporting sextortion accounts and they are taken down, but I would say that's not the norm.
Okay. Would there be a solution to implement to identify these fake accounts that Meta could implement that would help here?
Yeah, for sure. And they're planning to do something like that. We haven't quite seen that action yet.
Okay.
But there are practical things that they can do to detect these accounts. They're all following the same pattern. They're all accounts that are either newly created or they're hacked accounts that are just logging in for the first time from Nigeria. Then the username changes on the account for it to appear like a female name. And then that account is adding as many teen boys as they can, as many high schoolers as they can, to appear authentic, to kind of fit in with that friend group or that social circle, pretend to be a mutual acquaintance or somebody from that school, maybe from the other side of town. And that's when they engage with their targets and their victims.
Right. Okay. So they start engaging, and if a teenage boy responds, now they're hooked in. And what does the scammer do from there once they're communicating with the victim or usually the teenage boy?
Yeah, so one of the tricky things about this crime is the scammer is actually sending images first of a teen girl or a young woman in various stages of undress, and then they're asking the victim or their target to do the same. Send me a photo back. I sent you one. Now you send me one. As soon as that happens and they get that picture, that perfect piece of blackmail that they need, that's when the threats begin. Hey, I've screenshotted all your friends and followers. I've screenshotted your friends and family. I know where you go to school. I'm going to post it to your school, your teachers, your friends, unless if you pay me $300 right now.
And then if the teenager pays, I'm hearing that often the scammer will continue to ask for more money. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. If you pay, they are not deleting that image for probably quite a while. They're going to use that leverage over that teen's head for as long as they can.
Wow.
They'll continue to ramp up threats. They'll make up things as part of their script that says, "Oh, you've paid me the first $300. Now it's another $500 for my boss to delete the photo, or another $200 for me to remove it from the recycle bin or the trash folder." So those just keep going on and on and on until that kid has just no more money left.
What's happening when the boys that die by suicide? What is happening in those situations? Because I've heard that they're being encouraged to kill themselves.
In many of these cases, these scammers are absolutely ruthless. They don't care about human lives. They just want their next dollar. In the case of Jordan DeMay, we heard that he was encouraged to kill himself when he wasn't going to pay any more money. Right. We've seen these repeatedly in other cases where they just ramp up the pressure, just seem like they don't care about that kid's life and just torment them until they either pay or take their own life, or they're able to exit the scam, block, change their usernames, deactivate their accounts, go dark, go private on social media for a while.
Yeah. Okay. And I know that Meta recently made an announcement. So something like, in order to help fight against sextortion, we're going to start blurring nude images in direct messages. And then I read the fine print of that update, and the images, yes, are blurred, but then you can just click on it to view it if you'd like. What do you think about that as a solution to help fight sextortion?
I don't think the blurring of images is going to prevent any sextortion cases. They're involved with the conversation. Like, anyone's going to click on the image no matter what. Like, right. Especially a teenager.
Right. Correct. You're like teasing them into seeing nudity rather than just sending it. And my thought is, if you can identify it to blur it, why are we even allowing child sexual abuse material, minors' nude images to be viewed at all?
Absolutely. The other side of that announcement we got from Meta was that if a teen tries to send a nude image, they're going to have a safety pop-up that, says, hey, you shouldn't send nude images, or whatever that safety pop-up says. But then there's going to be a button to proceed anyway.
Right.
So how is that allowed?
Right. It's one of those things that's like, for some reason on the internet, it's allowed, but in real life, you would be like, that's definitely illegal. Like, so it's, whether we need legislation to pass to help make it so that kids cannot send nude images online. Let's talk about who's doing the sextorting. So you mentioned Nigeria. Can you tell listeners who these people are that are the sextorters or the
Yeah,
scammers?
absolutely. And this is where my research came in over this past year. We found that virtually all of the financial sextortion that's targeting minors here in the US over these past 2 years is attributable to West African organized and disorganized crime groups. Primarily, it's Nigeria. We also see a lot of this activity coming from the Ivory Coast. These scammers call themselves Yahoo Boys. And what they're doing is they're trading their tactics, their techniques, their different scams, and their scripts online in their own kind of criminal networks. They have groups on Facebook that have thousands of Yahoo Boy members that are just sharing tactics on how to scam people. Here's a script to use. Here's different images to use. They're literally sharing guides on how to sextort and blackmail teens on Facebook, on other platforms. So yeah, it's a huge mess.
Do these Facebook groups still exist where they're interacting and sharing scripts?
They do still exist. There's been recent media from Wired last week that shed a light on a lot of these Facebook groups. And of course, these platforms, when they're made aware of whatever's in the media report, they remove those specific groups. We looked back on Facebook the next day and found all the other Yahoo Boy groups are still there.
This is an example I see across all social media platforms. If they get bad PR, they'll make a change, but only to the item that was mentioned in the PR, not fix the problem in general. Like that, and that's not what we need. We don't need them to just band-aid up the PR piece. Like we need them to fix, like none of these Yahoo Boy scammers should be allowed to be sharing information on that platform.
Absolutely. Yeah. I get the same, reaction and message every time where if we highlight some material that's on these platforms that's illicit or against their policies, what we hear back is, okay, thank you for letting us know. We've removed the content that you flagged for us. But they haven't removed all the other content using the same hashtag, sharing the same material, similar groups. So it's just a whack-a-mole approach.
Do you feel like that's because a human isn't even reviewing it? It's just technology that's reviewing it for certain keywords or something and removing that one thing, but not putting like actual thought to it that maybe we should take another step? Like, why can't we think smarter about this?
Well, there's one thing that I think Meta can do to actually have a dedicated team of analysts aggressively going after deplatforming Yahoo Boys.
Yeah.
Meta already has a policy and groups built around that policy called dangerous organizations and individuals. This is their policy that, guides their deplatforming of ISIS, Al Qaeda, like other transnational organized crime and terrorist groups. They should classify Yahoo Boys under this entity. I think the reason they haven't yet is because traditional Yahoo Boys have been seen as fraudsters, online internet scammers, but not necessarily violent actors. But the scams that they're sharing now are absolutely violent. The language in them is violent. It's, sexual assault in these cases against children. Mm-hmm. So I think this absolutely qualifies to be classified as a dangerous organization. With that classification, Meta has analysts whose sole job is to go after groups that are trying to come back on a platform who have been classified as under this category.
Right. And how many accounts are we talking about on Meta's platforms between Facebook and Instagram that are related some way to the sextortion problem?
It's got to be in the hundreds of thousands. It's a huge number. The accounts generally, some of them are banned after a couple of days. So it's really whack-a-mole. We know that these criminals, each individual criminal is probably running a couple dozen accounts at any given time. And as soon as one is banned, they have the other one lined up to go.
Okay. So if these hundreds of thousands of accounts were to be deleted, I mean, Meta loses a little bit of ad revenue there that's getting served to those accounts. It's just my thought. Like one of the reasons why I just can't understand why they wouldn't take action on this. And I know that whenever it's going to cause a hit in their monthly active users, they resist making changes.
Yeah, for sure. That's my experience speaking with some of these platforms as well.
And is this only happening on Facebook and Instagram that you're seeing, or is there other platforms that kids are getting sextorted on?
So the top 3 platforms where minors are reporting sextortion: Snapchat, Instagram, and Wiz.
What's Wiz?
Oh, that's a new one. So Wiz is a social platform. It's been called a Tinder for teens,
Mm,
and it specifically markets itself towards the younger audience and matches teens by swiping left and right on each other's pictures, and then they can have a conversation
okay.
just like Tinder.
How do they verify that they're teenagers?
So Wiz has a facial scanning, when your account is being
Okay.
created. We have seen this being abused by criminals where they either scan someone else or they manipulate that data somehow, some way, in order to
Okay.
bypass that feature.
Okay. And then Snapchat's an obvious one because of the disappearing messages, and it's difficult to get the record of any crimes that happen on the platform. So I'm not surprised by that. Are the platforms doing anything helpful to stop sextortion?
I will say that different platforms have taken more aggressive approaches than others.
Okay.
Wiz, for example, was actually removed from the App Store and Google Play after concerns were raised about child safety issues on their platform.
Wow.
And they were
Okay.
forced to actually add more safeguards in place and then undergo another review by those app stores before they could be added
Okay.
back to the store. So we actually have seen lots of different features, safety features added to Wiz. Definitely a good move.
Hmm.
We would love to see that same sort of aggressive effort from Instagram as well as Snapchat.
Okay. Okay. Now, we recently had here in the US a new law passed called the Report Act that will now force the platforms to report grooming, sextortion, these type of crimes. I was just surprised to learn that the platforms were not required to monitor and report previously. So that these stats that we're seeing in reports is definitely going to spike, I feel like, because now they'll be required to do the reporting, and that will be public information, and we'll actually know real numbers or more accurate numbers on how many kids are getting exploited on these platforms. So I'm glad to see that. Not glad to see the numbers spiking, but glad to see more transparency into what's actually happening, and that will force some positive change, I believe. You had posted something on LinkedIn recently that the US Department of State had joined the fight in sextortion. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, this was actually some pretty big news this past week. A new government agency, US Department of State, which has essentially remained silent on the sextortion coming out of Nigeria and West Africa. They're now in the
Uh-huh.
fight. They have just held a meeting with high level ambassadors in Nigeria this past week. And one of the outcomes
Mm-hmm.
of that is the State Department is actually going to deploy a cybercrime advisor to Nigeria to help clamp down on cases of sextortion and other types of harmful internet
Great.
fraud.
Okay, that's good. And I know in John DeMay's case, I think was it the first one that they were able to find and extradite a couple of the Nigerian men that were involved in that case.
Yep, that was the first case, and for 2 arrests, 3 arrests that they made in that case out of the over 38,000 reported cases in these past 2 years, it's just a drop in the
Mm,
bucket. Hopefully, there's a lot more.
yeah, I agree. What didn't we cover that's important for parents to know regarding like stats, how this is happening, where it's happening? Anything else that you feel is important to know about sextortion?
So I think it's important for parents to, of course, they have the conversation, never send photos, that sort of thing. Don't talk with strangers online.
Yeah.
I think there's an important second piece of that conversation where if it does
Okay.
happen, come to us. We won't be mad.
Right.
We'll help you through it. You definitely want to keep those doors open. Even in these cases where parents have done everything right, had these conversations, these criminals are
Hmm.
tormenting, literally torturing the kids in their own room. And we've seen the tragic outcomes in these cases too. So anyone can become a victim,
Yeah.
even if you do everything right, even if you're aware of the scam, even if you've
Hmm.
had these conversations. So that's why I think we need to rely on the tech companies to truly deplatform these criminals once and for all.
Yeah. Okay. And when it does come to parents, so you're advising, tell them they can't send nude images. I think if your kids are old enough and they're active on social media, I would say if they're on social media, they are old enough to know that they could get contacted by a stranger. Someone could ask for a nude photo. You cannot send the nude photo. But I love the layering on of if you make a mistake and do that, you can come to me. I'm your safe space. I will fix it for you and we'll figure it out. There is hope and everything is going to be okay. Because I know a lot of these teenage boys just feel like their life is over.
Absolutely.
What's your thoughts on like teen social media use in general? I love to just throw this in there. Like, do you feel like social media now, with like a real lack of regulation, is safe for kids? Is there a certain age you would advise on after everything you've learned?
I don't think I'm qualified to answer that,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. If you had a kid that was 13, would you let them on social media?
Oh my God, I never thought about this. We would probably have to have some very serious conversations about the risks before we even explore that option.
Yeah, great answer. So we definitely need to mention where to report it if it does happen to your family. So feel free to expand on that.
So let's say the worst case scenario happens. Your kid or someone you know is a victim of sextortion and they come to you. What should they do? First thing, definitely screenshot the evidence, block the criminal, do not maintain contact. That criminal, they're immediately telling that kid, do not block me. As soon as you block me, I'm going to leak the photos. Don't worry. They're very unlikely to actually leak the photos. They're just trying to get money super quick. Block them, change your usernames or deactivate your accounts. Because once you block them, they will try to come back on a different account, searching you from another account. So either change your username so they can't search you or deactivate your social media accounts for a couple of weeks. That's generally enough time for the criminal to forget about you. Everything's been deleted and they've moved on to other victims. If you're a minor, definitely report the incident to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have the cyber tip line at ncmec.org. If the images do end up getting posted in a very rare circumstance or sent to your friends in a group chat on Instagram, for example, these companies, these social platforms participate in a service called Take It Down in partnership with NCMEC. So if you go to takeitdown.ncmec.org, you can actually hash that photo, which will prevent it from being shared, and it will take it down from those social platforms. Lastly, go to the FBI, submit a report at tips.fbi.gov or ic3.gov. Let them know that these crimes are happening, and all these reports are helpful.
Thank you. Would you say, Paul, even if it doesn't follow through with like a full sextortion, like maybe even before the nude image is shared and you're being asked for a nude image and you start to feel weird about it, like at what point should you be like, I should probably report this?
If you're a teen, you should report it as soon as another person tries to entice you or coerce you into sending a photo or doing something sexual. Report it early, report it often. Sometimes the first report doesn't get it right, so report it again and then just block them.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I really appreciate all the work that you do to help protect our children from online harms like sextortion. Unfortunately, too many kids are getting targeted with this, and hopefully with legislation and real change on behalf of the platforms, we will see an improvement in this issue, but it really takes people like you speaking out on what's happening in these children's experiences. And for parents, please talk to your kids about this. Talk to them in whatever way is appropriate, you feel is appropriate, but it's important and could save their life one day, or could very much save them from a traumatic experience. So, Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.